Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another live event here at Golden Artist Colors. My name is Ulysses Jackson. I am a senior formulator here at Golden, and I'm joined today by Ladd and Bernie, the fabulous humans and inventors of PanPastel, which we're so thrilled to welcome into our Golden offering. And also we're joined today off screen by our materials and application specialists, who will be answering questions in the chat as well as feeding us questions from the audience. So we really look forward to those. So thank you all for joining us today. And we're really thrilled to get to talk about PanPastel. So Ladd and Bernie, since probably most of our audience, some of them hopefully do know about PanPastel, but some might not. So I was hoping you could explain to us a little bit about the invention of PanPastel and what it offers to artists that might be uniquely different from a conventional pastel.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ulysses. We're so excited and delighted to be here at Golden. We've been living and working in New Berlin, New York, where Golden is based and manufacture all their products. And for the last almost 3 months, and we've really enjoyed being alongside, working side by side with the Golden team, a bunch of great people. So thank you for having us. So a little bit about PanPastel. So the idea behind the product is most people are familiar with the pastel stick format, and pastel medium has been in a stick format for hundreds of years. And before that, obviously, humans have been using raw pigment to create art going back thousands of years. So there hadn't been many changes other than the original presentation of pastel in the stick format originally, as I say, going back the hundreds of years. So we decided to look at that and see if we could develop and deliver a new format for artists. And the format we came up with was the pan format. So it's basically pastel in a pan, and it brings a lot of new ways that you can use the pastel medium. So it's still a dry medium, but we wanted to make a medium that worked between a drawing and a painting material, between wet and dry. So basically it's a dry medium that functions like a paint. It's paintable. And that brings, other than being paintable, it allows the artist to mix dry colors for the first time. And it also, and here you can see an example of where you can blend colors together. And that's a really unique characteristic.
Yeah, so I often think of when I'm drawing with something, the tool itself is making the mark. Like a pencil makes the mark.
Right.
And then when I'm painting, I'm grabbing a tool to dip into a paint and then transferring the product to that. So would this this would be more like a paint type of system?
Yes, because it's functioning like a paint with the combination of the tool. And the soft tools that you can see being used at the moment allow you to make a variety of marks in the same way you might do with a wet medium and a brush.
And that was a really unique invention as well, right? A standard sponge doesn't apply in the same way. Could you talk a little bit about how the soft tool might be different from some other materials?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, so we developed the soft tools out of we call it a micropore sponge. So it's quite dense, picks up just the right amount of color, lays down just the right amount of color. The knife covers that we developed and the sponge bars, they're basically traditional brush range, flat, round, filbert, and point. So we didn't deviate off of with too many different shapes and sizes and things like that. But the sponges are key. You can, if you have a PanPastel in front of you, take a swipe with your finger, put it on a piece of paper, pick up a soft tool, take a swipe, and you'll see a drastic difference between the two. So the sponges are very important to the range.
And I thought it was really neat that on these handles, which you also invented and are patented under the soft tool brand, the tips are removable, right? So you can put another one on. So if you say you're a little heavy-handed, you wear one out, you can get extra tips to replace that.
Yeah, and the idea, Ulysses, behind that was to take a non-absorbent painting tool and make it absorbent by putting the sponge cover on the tool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now I know when I've drawn in the past with a standard stick pastel, I make a mark and it's a very hard mark, and then I spend a lot of time getting rid of that. Is that
Right.
something that you have to worry about with the PanPastels?
No, because, well, there are a number of differences. So PanPastel by no means replaces a pastel stick. That wasn't our intention. Our intention was to bring a new medium, a new material to artists to explore. And one of the things that, as you say, the pastel stick gives a very a signature mark.
Right, let's
yeah,
do an
let's-
overhead and maybe give an example of what that looks like. So everyone's kind of familiar with the kind of the chattery mark, right?
And you can see the texture of the paper is coming through, it's showing through there. And pastel sticks are more opaque.
And then the PanPastel mark is, let's compare those. That lush, wow, look at that. I love how as it kind of goes over itself, you get that different in density. That's
yes,
really
you have a
cool.
lot more control over the opacity and transparency.
Look at, it's kind of glidey. It's like
Right.
a little slippery, maybe? Is that how would you describe
It's
it?
kind
or
of
what would you?
velvety. People
Velvety.
describe it as velvety. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And our intention was to keep all the good characteristics of the pastel medium, so the purity of color, the vibrancy, the fact that it's instant, and also because it's a dry medium, it doesn't, the color doesn't shift. So what you see is what you get when you paint the color, because you're not going from wet to dry. But at the same time, there were some characteristics that we wanted to add to that. So the mixability we've just shown, they're low dust to use, and they're also erasable.
Oh, they're erasable? Can we?
Yes.
Well, I'll show you a quick erasing exercise here on the marks. I guess we have them up on top, and this one is the mark we just made.
Oh, look at that. Comes right off.
Comes
And that's
right
a
off.
vinyl eraser?
This
Just
is just a standard vinyl eraser. You can try any eraser you want to. They're slightly different marks. Some may be a little bit more crumbly. The vinyl erasers are probably the best ones that we tried. I think one of the biggest things about the color is that it's instantly mixable. So you can see in the demonstration on the photograph that you have red and yellow, and you instantly have orange. It works exactly like a fluid medium.
Like a paint, yeah. That's neat.
But it's dry, it's erasable. The pans can stay open. You don't need to worry about covering them. They won't dry out. So
Yeah, that's super cool to have the open palette as well.
Yes.
And can you use pastels with them?
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, so we can go to overhead shot again there. We're just going to go back to the same piece we were working on here. This is the pastel stick, fully compatible with the PanPastel.
Super cool. And I think it's probably a great time. We just covered a lot of information, so
Right.
maybe to turn to the audience to see if there's any questions coming in from the field we can.
Yes, we have some great questions. So let's go to this one here. When you were putting out the, you mentioned that it was lower dust,
Right.
Bernie. There was a question about shed. So can you talk a little bit about how the PanPastel has less shed, maybe
Right.
than a traditional stick pastel?
Yes, because if we could have an overhead shot here, please, because it's a combination of the soft tool and the fact that you're able to lift a controlled amount of color from the pan. When you push the color into onto the paper, when you apply the color, it pushes into whatever tooth is there. So the combination of the tool and the pan format really helps with that. Occasionally, I will see that someone in a workshop might be overworking the pan. So you only really need to swipe it once or twice. And if you see a little dust gathering on the pan surface, that just means that the sponge tool is saturated. There's nowhere for that color to go, and it's going back on the pan. So you just maybe apply a little less pressure, and just only 1 or 2 swipes is necessary.
And that was one of the amazing things to me when I started using the PanPastel, is how easy it is to take it off. So
Yeah.
what I found was really nice about that is I can have the palette and just be dipping back and forth. I'm not working to get the color, to lose my concentration.
Right.
It's just really effortless to go between.
Yes.
And then also cleaning off the tool on a paper towel to
Yeah.
get your fresh color is really nice
So,
as well for
yeah.
how quick that can go.
So you don't need a different tool for every color. You just can remove any excess pigment that's on there. Your color is still stained because we're dealing with artist pigments, from the color you just used. but you can switch to another color. So I'm going to switch to yellow with very little contamination between the colors.
That's really
So,
remarkable.
yeah.
Yeah, are there any other questions?
Oh yes, we have several. I'm going to actually combine two questions that showed up in the chat. One is, are there any mediums for PanPastel? And then just to clarify, there was another question that asked about mediums in terms of like media, mixed media, when it comes to adding, say, acrylic or watercolor or oil. Can you speak to first the mediums that are dry, that are for PanPastel, and then maybe how it might play with others?
Great, so maybe you guys take the first one, and
Okay.
I'll take the second one.
Okay, that
All
sounds
right.
good. So do you want to?
Yeah, so we developed 5 pastel mediums. The mediums actually, when we sat down and started thinking about those, they came straight off the concept of Golden's mediums, which are extensive, and we thought, why not have a pastel medium that kind of mirrors the idea that Golden puts all these different texturing mediums for artists to use. We have a colorless blender, which is an absolutely wonderful color. It's actually colorless, but we still call it a color. It's a weak white. So when you want to extend a color on your substrate, you can use this instead of white, so you're not getting that sort of immediate. It's a little bit more controllable than the white. We also have a fine pearl white, a coarse pearl white, a fine black white, and a coarse black. So they're basically a mica-based. They go down very nice. They've got a little bit of shimmer on the fine mediums, and the coarse mediums have got a little bit extra shimmer.
So it's a way to make your own pearlescent colors. For example, taking the pearl white medium and adding it to one of the original colors. And just on the colorless blender, Ladd, another important point is that you can extend the color. So it allows the color to become more transparent and flow more, and you can extend it more without making it opaque. As if you were to add white instead of the colorless blender, you would get a tint.
Yeah,
so
more of a opaque tint, right?
Yeah.
So that would be analogous to, say, an acrylic using like a gloss medium to make a glaze.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the second part of the question of how do these play with acrylics and oils, so, with our brands, we want them all to be able to be used pretty freely. So before we acquired PanPastel, we did extensive testing to make sure that you could paint over them with acrylics, that you wouldn't have any adhesion issues, that you could go over acrylics with them, you can go over them with oils. And there's even some techniques where you can use a wet oil first to put down a nice wet bed, and then do the PanPastel over the wet oil and get some really neat sgraffito effects there. So it's really versatile, and it does play nice with other media, as well as watercolor can be used in a mixed media kind of setting. So it really does just open up more potential for artists. I've been finding it's really fun to start with a PanPastel for kind of, you'd say, blocking out work or starting work, underpainting, and then move to refine that in parallel with other media. So that's pretty exciting.
And I think the other cool thing for artists is, even if you've devoted your life to one particular medium, or you're going down, you've focused on a particular medium, introducing a few PanPastels to your techniques and trying them out, it's amazing how you can push your techniques further by incorporating PanPastel colors.
And do you find that people who do representational work are able to use the PanPastels as well as people who do abstract work?
Yeah, very much so. I think on Instagram, if you look at #PanPastel, you'll find a wide and extensive variety, from super realistic portraits through to very abstract work as well, and combined with encaustic and cold wax and all different techniques.
Yeah,
it's very exciting.
Cool. What else do we have for questions out there?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great questions. Keep them coming.
Okay.
So this one, I'm actually combining a few questions and comments. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the pastel and the preparation of the substrate or the paper, because we did have some folks commenting on they use PanPastel in combination with some of their acrylics as a preparation as a ground, and then others were asking about different papers. So maybe just a little sort of high level understanding about the influence of the two together would be great.
Oh, great. Yeah, so maybe we should bring over a sanded paper and
Yes.
get a fresh piece of watercolor paper here
Yep.
to show how that affects. And then, so these are
And
conventional
there's a
papers.
UFO as well.
And then, of course, Golden makes a number of grounds designed for, and textures designed for additional effects. But this will
Yes.
give a great example for 3 different surfaces and their kind of effect on the mark. So,
Yeah.
Bernie, maybe you can explain what we have in front of us.
Yeah,
I have an
just
extra sheet here.
Just a little background. So that's one of the most common questions we get, what surface to use PanPastel on. And really the answer is it's limitless. There are limitless possibilities with paper because unlike sticks where you need some tooth to hold the color, with PanPastel you have more control over the color being laid down, and the sponge is pushing, as I said earlier, is pushing the color into whatever tooth is there. So you really can go from smooth, low tooth surfaces to really textured surfaces that are high tooth, like sanded papers. So here we've got UPO, this first one. The one in the middle is Pastel Matte, which has grab. And then the third one is a drawing pastel paper. So
this
really,
is kind of like a fine, almost like a micro sandpaper, a little barely toothy. but
yes,
Yeah.
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 And sanded papers work great. Watercolor papers, printmaking papers, canvas. It really is. Everybody should experiment and try, and they'll figure out what works best for them. And then the next thing, and maybe Ladd, you can demonstrate, and I'll just explain the same color will look very different on each
So
surface.
which tool is this?
So this is the angle slice round. It's one of the larger, one of the 3 larger tools. We have an angle slice round, a angle slice flat, and then the big oval. And those are primarily used for laying down, for blocking in larger areas. So I'm just going to take a couple swipes of color. This is on the sort of traditional drawing paper. You can see you get to mark that. I'm going to wipe the tool off. This is the pastel matte, so you're going to see an immediate grab, much more intense color. And then the same color on the polypropylene UPO paper. Get an extremely transparent color.
So the tooth of this paper is giving you a lot more density, but it removes it quicker. Is that
Yeah.
Right.
basically from the
Right.
load? And so you get just a different amount of flow, in
Yes.
essence, based on the surface of the paper.
Yeah, you'll find a very different coverage for every different substrate. So if you're using a smooth paper, one swipe of color will go quite a ways for blocking in the paper. You get a toothy paper, you're going to have an immediate grab, and it'll use up the pastel right away, and you need to go back for more.
But you still need a little bit of tooth, so a glossy surface is probably the only surface that PanPastel wouldn't. It needs something to
So you
grab
don't want to try it
onto.
on just straight plexiglass?
No.
Okay.
Or
All right, that
a
makes
super
sense.
glossy substrate or ground. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Terrific. I mean, I suppose you could put the pastel ground on plexiglass and try that. That'd be
you
cool.
could
Right,
prime-
yeah,
you could prime the
absolutely.
plexi, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that was wonderful. Thank you. So I have a couple more questions. One came up that we actually were talking about earlier today. If you don't mind, the soft tool, why not just use a makeup sponge?
Yeah, that's a question that has come up over the years. Well, first of all, the sponges are very different. When you compare them side by side, PanPastel, our soft sponges are a much denser sponge material. And it actually took us 2 years alongside developing the colors to get the optimum formulation of sponge. Makeup sponges are intended to be used on a very delicate surface, the skin, once or twice a day, and they're used with really low pigment products, cosmetic products, eyeshadow, that type of thing. So they really aren't intended for the type of rigors that they'll be put through in the studio. Here we're dealing with very highly pigmented colors. We're dealing with everything from sanded paper through to smooth paper. We don't know what the artist is going to be using it on. So we needed to make sure that the sponge was durable enough that it can stand up to some of those surfaces and be used in the studio, but soft enough that it doesn't dig or kind of make marks in the sponge, it will lift the right amount of color so that you can control it from the pan to the surface. So, Ladd, do you have anything to add on that?
No, just in general, the cosmetic sponges that you find in any of the drugstores, they're of a much larger pore size. So you're going to find that they pick up a lot of color. When you go to put it on the surface, the first thing that happens is that color falls off onto the paper, and you lose control over the mark, and the PanPastel sort of just is on the paper, and you need to work with it on the surface.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for taking that one. We have a lot of questions around fixative and mixed media applications. I know you won't be able to answer that specifically without knowing what they're doing, but just a general, if you don't mind talking about fixative and what are some attributes of a good application, a good fix, maybe that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Do you want to
Sure.
start?
Yeah, I think fixatives are pretty straightforward for PanPastel. Use them like you would any other fixative for any other dry medium. If you're going to use it in mixed media, let's say you're using it pencil or graphite or something like that, you can use PanPastel side by side with it and fix it the exact same way. We always recommend 3 light coats of fixative instead of trying to get it fixed in 1 coat. That's true for pencils, pastel sticks, PanPastel. That's the best way to apply fixative. Otherwise, you end up saturating. You may have some color shift in the dry medium, and that's what we recommend. 3 light coats.
And some people don't use Pastel Fix. They don't want to use it, or sorry, fixative. It's compatible with all pastel fixatives. The good thing about the soft sponges pushing the color into whatever tooth is there on the paper, it kind of holds the color and grabs it. And yes, it's a dry medium, so you can still, if you wanted to, you could still deliberately smudge it. Mm-hmm. It depends. Some people don't care about that because it's not going to be rubbed when it's a finished piece of artwork. But if you want to protect it,
can we go to a top shot real quick? What I'm going to do. We just made this mark on the toothy paper, so this is the heaviest applied PanPastel. See, we just tap that off. There's very little dust coming off the paper, which gets back to the fixative question. You don't need fixative as much or as often as you normally would on pastels.
But it is a personal preference. Some people prefer to use it, some people don't.
Sure, and for the artist who is aware of the saturation, they could use our MSA. Golden does not produce our own fixative, but we do offer our MSA archival varnish that some artist uses a varnish fixative, but it is going to do that saturation and give that really robust protection. And so certain times, some people who want to show something without glass might actually varnish it, but you just would have to be aware of the change in value. Maybe practice on some test piece first, get used to what that will do so you can accommodate that with your composition.
So there was actually someone that was in the chat describing their use on polymer clays. Are there any unusual applications that are out there that might be fun to hear about?
Well, PanPastel is being applied in all different directions, and one of the cool things about it, because it's dry color, it's being used to recreate something, whether it's in polymer clay or in other media, that looks realistic. So if you're creating a model, that type of thing, because sure, you can do that with other color mediums, but because it's dry color, it doesn't look painted on. So some techniques call for a more realistic effect, and PanPastel works good for that.
The PanPastel can be applied to the polymer clays. You can knead it into the clay, change the color. You can apply it to the surface, bake it, and it acts just like the regular polymer clays.
And that's something that it can do that our other products can't do. So someone recently showed me the polymer clay they had done where they had, while it was still wet, applied the PanPastel to the surface before baking it. And it was really quite remarkable, an exciting new area that I didn't think.
And that was something that when we developed the product, we had no intention of it fitting that part of the market. We were very happy that it was working for PanPastels, but and the polymer clays, and it's great to see how the product has grown and fit into different parts of the market.
Well, when we were developing it, we knew we knew by putting it out there, that material, that artists would take it and make it their own, and that's exactly what's been happening. So it's exciting for us, and I know it will be for Golden to explore all the ways that it's being used.
That is exciting. And there's some techniques that I have been wowed by. So maybe we could show the stenciling thing.
Sure.
I thought that was really different from conventional pastel.
Just stack these up and use the same
Yeah.
page. Yeah, so this is just a regular stencil. You can lay that down on the paper, and just going to clean off the sponge here.
And so if you're doing this technique with a conventional pastel, what would happen?
Well, it would be much harder to, maybe we can just show with the stick pastel that we've got.
Sure, I'll try the
it's
stick
much-
pastel right next to it there.
It's just going to glide over the
Right, it only hits the
surface.
high points,
Yeah.
it doesn't hit the low, versus the PanPastel that really transfers that mark right through,
Yeah.
giving you just that really, versatile. You can make your own stencil.
Right.
It's just really different from the conventional pastel for that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Piece of paper
What
here.
other questions do we have?
Well, we're getting new ones all the time.
Oh, amazing.
I think that stimulated a lot of interesting questions in the chat about encaustics, other types of clay, and it's nice to see folks attending, talking to each other, which is
Oh, great.
wonderful.
Oh, good.
So there's a lot of interest there, and I think it'll be fun to do more and more events as we move through this. Ulysses, was there anything I think we were going to ask a question of the audience about?
Well, so that's great. So one of the things that I'm really excited about being in the research and development side is that Ladd and Bernie brought a lot of new product ideas to us that they have a lot of great ideas, but they're a very small team. And so now that we have the resources of Golden behind it, we're really excited about expanding the offerings of PanPastel to the marketplace. But as we get into that, thinking about new products and new colors, we were wondering to the audience what might be beneficial to you. And so we'd love to hear your feedback and ideas around what might be some great extensions in the PanPastel soft tools line.
Yeah, that was an area that Ladd and I, even though we saw all these ways and directions that the color range or that the products could go or the concept could go, it was really hard in a small business like ours to be able to have all the time. There weren't enough hours in the day to be able to deliver PanPastel, manufacture it, and get it to the various countries around the world, and then at the same time continue developing the ideas. So being with Ulysses, being with Golden is wonderful because that's what you guys are so good at, and the team here is amazing. You've got all the technology and all the resources to be able to do that. So
yeah, it's really exciting. So as those product suggestions come in, maybe we should talk about the range as it stands, how many colors we have in PanPastel,
Right.
and how maybe the tint and shade system kind of is set up.
yes, we don't really have examples, but
I have some kits here.
okay, yes.
Yep.
So
Can we
So-
get an overhead shot, please?
So there are 20 mass tones, 20 pure colors in the range, and then each color has a corresponding tint, shade, and extra dark. So the tint is the mass tone with white, the shade is the mass tone or the pure color with black, and the extra dark is the mass tone or pure color with more black. So it gives people the possibility of mixing in any direction and creating their own values as well.
Yeah, so you could you can get all four for convenience,
Right.
or you could also make your own with white and black,
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
that's the blending versus that convenience. I find as an artist, sometimes I just want to do hit the same place to start with,
Right.
and it's really great to have it pre-mixed. But,
Yes.
Certainly if you bought, say, one, you could,
Mix
mix
your
on
own.
the fly as
Yes.
desired.
That's exactly right. And so there are 80 colors, 80 of what we call the original colors, and then there are 6 metallics, 6 pearlescents, and the 5 mediums. So there's 97 in total.
Very cool. And I see as these sets sit here that it actually comes with some free applicators in the bottom.
Yeah,
right?
the sets.
That's novel.
Yeah.
Lets people get going right away. So that's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Each set has some free soft tools.
Cool.
We want the artist to be able to enjoy using PanPastel the minute they buy it. So that's why we've continued to put those in the sets.
Very cool. So Stacy, do we have any ideas coming in from the field?
Tons. It's
Oh,
wonderful.
exciting.
Thank you, everybody.
Are there any unusual ones or interesting ones we should talk about? or mention?
Unusual. I think. Wow. I mean, there's some great ones. There's a desire for like a half pan set that's been mentioned a few times, and urban sketching and
Okay, so
polymer
specific
clay.
kind
Like
of directions
oh
of
yeah.
use. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those
some-
are really,
Yeah.
really nice.
We'll go through this chat and gather all of these requests and take a look at them. Thank you, everybody.
Most excellent.
That's great.
So one thing you were showing me the other day, Ladd, was that really neat stamping thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a clear stamp pad. Happens to be Versamark. You can take a regular any stamp, and you can just dab it on the pad. Put it on the paper. And just take a color.
Let's get a nice dark color on that.
Nice dark color. All right, we'll do a dark color. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So there's the magic. I'm sure
Oh,
you're
look
all.
at
I'm sure you're all wooing at this point.
I'm wooing. Every time I'm wooing. That just,
What's
has
nice-
a lot of possibilities. And
What's
so,
nice, you can take the tool and just add a bit of color to it.
Yeah.
They're fully erasable, so you can go back in and actually erase over it, and you get a little bit of. I need to let this dry just a little bit, but it's very easy to clean up.
Yeah, that's really neat. So Stacy, what's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you. Since we last chatted, Ulysses,
Okay.
our community organizer here has dropped in a link for everybody. So it would be amazing if you went to the link in the chat and put your ideas for new, what you would like to see us do in our innovation, and we'll collect those there as well. So thank you so
amazing.
much.
Yeah.
We'd love it if you joined us and took a leap over there and took a moment to fill that out.
Wonderful.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So, are there any final questions, or are we? Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so there's a question of whether anything was going to change now that Golden acquired PanPastel. And so one of the reasons that Bernie and Ladd partnered with us is they feel confident that we're going to take their formula and be good stewards of it. So in my role in research and development, we always want to keep things working unless something was forced to change. So we have no intention of changing or cheapening or doing anything to the product unless, say, sometimes a manufacturer might discontinue a raw ingredient. Then we would be forced to find a color that hopefully looks exactly the same. And what we've done with our brands is when we've made a change like that, we talk about it. So the only change I know of currently is we currently have yellow ochre in the line, listed as yellow ochre. But it actually uses yellow oxide as the pigment in the current formula. So you will see the name change on the product, but inside it's still the exact same material. We just wanted it to reflect the correct pigment identification number. So that is one thing we will be changing. But overall, we want to keep everything like it is. We think it's really great and fascinating technology, super different from what we've done before, really opens up a great new area for product development, for future offerings, and versatility. And there's so many techniques that we don't know yet, right? So we look forward to hearing from our audience how you use it. And so any way you can get that information to us will be helpful for us. And along the way, we're always looking to partner with you, the artists, to fulfill your dreams. So we thank you for being out there.
Yeah, I think just so everyone knows, the transition was flawless. 3 weeks in November from our factory to Golden's. The formulas are the same, techniques are the same, manufacturing's identical, and it's absolutely flawless.
And Ladd's been out there getting our team up and running, making sure everything's smooth. He's been working with me on the quality control side. We have really nice quality standards in place and are just super excited to have this offering to just grow our portfolio.
I think all you're going to see is new and exciting color extensions and other things coming from the relationship with PanPastel and Golden.
Yep.
So, I want to thank everyone again for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So have a fantastic day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.